Hey beauties, welcome back to my channel. It was a crazy week, so I had to move Fragrance Friday to Sunday, but here we are, and I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday weekend if you were out celebrating the 4th of July. For today's video, I am sharing some oldie goldies. All of these fragrances are at least 10 years old, one of them nearly 40 years old, but they still have modern appeal. They're classics, they're favorites. It doesn't really matter what's new to launch, what's hot, what's trending. These are fragrances that are constantly in my rotation. I love wearing them and I still highly recommend them. I have 10 fragrances to talk about. I'm going to start with the newest launch and then we will work our way back in time, sort of waltz down memory lane if you will. So the first fragrance is D&G L'Impératrice No. 3. This was first launched in 2009, so it's 11 years old. But this is a new discovery for me. I just picked this up a couple months ago with zero knowledge about this fragrance. I quickly realized that I have been living under a rock, but if I were doing a blind test, I would have thought this fragrance was a new launch. It's just so beautiful, so captivating and fresh, and it just blew my mind. I purchased this sort of on a whim from Sephora. It's described as flamboyant and energetic, succulent exotic fruits, bright pink florals give way to a musky, appetite-arousing base. Some of the top notes include kiwi and watermelon, which doesn't sound incredibly sophisticated, and yet this fragrance is incredibly elegant. I'm gonna go ahead and spray on my little blotter card. It's so fresh, floral, summery, slightly fruity. It's beautiful. Oh my goodness. This fragrance is so feminine. It's incredible. And after a minute, that sweetness, the fruity burst starts to calm down and you're left with that floral heart, the musk in the base. It's an incredibly modern fragrance. I love wearing this scent. I think it's so beautiful over the summer. It's kind of like a fresh body splash, but a little bit more elegant than that. I think for people who really enjoy Eau Tendre from Chanel, you will really like this fragrance. My second oldie goldie is definitely more of a fall winter type fragrance, well on its way to becoming a classic. This is Tom Ford's Black Orchid. This was first launched in 2006, so it's 14 years old. This was the first fragrance that Tom Ford ever launched. The bottle was inspired by Art Deco architecture, and there is something about this fragrance that is timeless, in my opinion. It's so dark and moody, with keynotes of black truffle, bergamot, black orchid, black plum, a noir gourmand accord, and patchouli. It falls into the warm floral category, and while it leans pretty feminine, Black Orchid is truly a unisex fragrance. There are a lot of men who wear Black Orchid, and it smells incredible on them. This fragrance is a showstopper. It's a head turner, a conversation starter. So many people know about Black Orchid, it's almost like joining the club. It is so sultry, so sexy. On a man or a woman, this would be an evening fragrance. There is something incredibly decadent, very sophisticated about this fragrance. It's unlike anything else. Black Orchid truly created a category, which is why it's such a standout. You know, Tom Ford is known for his fragrances. There are so many beautiful fragrances that have gained a lot of popularity, but Black Orchid will always kind of be the one. It's kind of like the main pillar. It is black tie in a bottle. I always look forward to wearing this fragrance, and I save this for special occasions. It's not a fragrance that I'm constantly getting a ton of use out of, because it is a little bit deeper, it's pretty moody. Living in hot, humid Florida, this isn't going to be an everyday fragrance, but there's something that is just so special about it. Next is one of my favorite fragrances of all time. This is Dolce & Gabbana The One. I recently picked this up, but this has been on my must-have fragrance list for years. Been one of my most beloved fragrances for years. This also was launched in 2006, so it is 14 years old, and yet every time I spray this fragrance, it is so modern. I think it is one of the most beautiful fragrances ever created. by anybody. It's described as a warm oriental floral with a modern sensuality. Notes of bergamot, mandarin, lychee, peach, Madonna lily, plum, jasmine, vetiver, vanilla, amber, and musk. The style is tempting, modern, and glamorous. Even this fragrance bottle is just so glamorous. You look at it and it's just classy. It's clean, chic, beautiful lines. I love this gold cap. You can see the juice is slightly warm and sensual, so it almost gives you an idea of what the fragrance is going to smell like before you even spray. So excited. It's breathtaking. Just a masterpiece. It is the most masterful fragrance. It's wildly feminine, slightly sweet. It's not too sweet, but there is a sweetness in there that I think is just so yummy right off the top. But then very quickly it starts to dry down and you get a lot of warmth. You get the amber, vanilla, and musk, which is one of my favorite combinations, but it's just kind of sensual. It's a very sexy fragrance, but not incredibly heavy. I feel like I could wear the one in the day and I wouldn't feel like I was doing too much. It wouldn't be too overpowering. I think the one is a classic fragrance that could be a signature scent. It's kind of a power fragrance, truly. You wear this and people are going to be wowed by you. I'm going to be wowed by you because I love this fragrance so much. I'm so happy I finally added this to my collection and I find myself not wanting to wear anything else. The next fragrance on my list is one that unfortunately I don't have here to show you physically, but I had to talk about it because to this day it is still one of the most popular fragrances, and that is Flower Bomb, released in 2005. It's hard to believe it has been 15 years because it is still one of the best-selling fragrances year after year. And I can tell you from my experience when I worked at Nordstrom, it was insane how popular this fragrance was for Christmas, around holidays, Mother's Day, any big holiday. I wish I knew the exact numbers because you just couldn't keep it on the shelves. People go crazy for this fragrance. And it's been around for 15 years. I find it to be a little bit sweet. So it's a fragrance that I don't wear. I don't own that fragrance, but I still think it's incredibly modern and I can see why it has such mass appeal. Top notes include bergamot, green tea. It has a heart of jasmine, rose, freesia, orchid, base notes of musk and patchouli. This is one of those fragrances that has already withstood the test of time. You know, 15 years later, it's as if it's a new launch. So I can only imagine that the next 10, 20, 30 years, this fragrance is going to maintain popularity. We're now traveling all the way back to 2001. 19 years ago was the first launch of Coco Mademoiselle. That is so hard to believe because this is the top-selling women's fragrance now from Chanel, and it is wildly popular. Again, one of the top-selling women's fragrances year after year. This particular bottle isn't from 2001, but it's still incredibly old, so I am not going to spray this. It's been sitting on my vanity, and it just doesn't quite smell the same. It's not terrible, but it's slowly getting there. You know, it's not great. It doesn't do this fragrance justice because this is one of the most beautiful fragrances ever. I always say that Coco Mademoiselle is like the homecoming queen of Chanel fragrances. Number 5 is the queen, always will be. Even though it doesn't have modern appeal, there's just something about it that transcends fragrance. But Coco Mademoiselle is still wildly popular, and of course they recently released the Coco Mademoiselle Intense, which I really love that fragrance as well, but there's just something about the original. You still see the ads during the holidays with Keira Knightley. Top notes include orange, mandarin, orange blossom, and bergamot. It has middle notes of mimosa, jasmine, Turkish rose, and ylang ylang. Base notes of tonka bean, patchouli, vanilla, vetiver, and white musk. It is just so nice. It is so soft and feminine. This is a signature scent. It can be worn all occasions, day, evening, year round. It's just achieved that level of greatness where I think there is no time and place that would be inappropriate for Coco Mademoiselle. This is a classic. My next oldie goldie gives me so much nostalgia. It's Gucci Rush. This fragrance was launched back in 1999, but I remember this fragrance from high school, and I graduated in 2005, but I remember all of the senior girls when I was an underclassman. All of the cool girls wore Gucci Rush, so I just had to have this fragrance, and I thought it was so mature and so cool. And to this day, I love the scent of Gucci Rush. Gucci Rush is described as intoxicating and addictive, with notes of gardenia, freesia, jasmine, vanilla, and patchouli. The bottle itself is incredibly unique. It certainly stands out, but the fragrance itself is a standout. I love it. It truly is addicting. Sort of sweet, sensual, very warm. To me, this is more of a fall-winter fragrance. Definitely leans more evening because it's a bit sexy. It kind of has a throwback appeal, but I still think it's modern. I love Gucci Rush. I will continue to wear Gucci Rush, but it does kind of remind me of the 90s. Perhaps it's because I have those memories from high school. It's been 21 years, but it's still available. It's still sexy as ever, and it's one of those fragrances that I like to wear when I'm in a fun, flirty mood. Like, I'll just spritz it on like, ooh, I'm gonna do something different today. Something a little bit spicy, just to mix things up. Another one of my 1999 favorites, which unfortunately I seem to have misplaced all of my little mini bottles, is J'adore by Dior. And I'm sure it helps that they are constantly re-releasing new interpretations, so it always seems sort of fresh and new. But it's just one of the most opulent, sophisticated fragrances that I have ever smelled to this day. Nothing tops it. It's described as sweet but balmy, slightly sharp floral with fresh mandarin, jasmine, plum, orchid, rose, musk, blackberry in the trail. I cannot believe this was created in 1999. Now this fragrance brings me back to college because I had a roommate who would douse herself in J'adore by Dior, and prior to living with her, I don't think I was familiar with this fragrance. I learned to love it. I sort of had to, but truly to this day, I do think of her and she was a very classy, elegant woman, but it's just a timeless fragrance, and I think of Charlize Theron and the ads, everything about it. Next is this little sexy number. Hypnotic Poison was released in 1998. It's been 22 years, and yet this is still one of my favorite fragrances to wear on a date night. Most of the time, I like to save this for fall-winter because it is a little bit deeper, moodier, but it truly is hypnotic. Beautiful fragrance. It is a classic. It has top notes of apricot, plum, and coconut. Middle notes are tuberose, jasmine, lily of the valley, rose, Brazilian rosewood, and caraway. It has base notes of sandalwood, almond, vanilla, and musk. Now, vanilla and musk is almost always a sexy combination, but I don't know how I never realized it has coconut. It makes so much sense now. I personally love coconut. And it's not a beachy coconut, it's just kind of that creamy, kind of dreamy coconut. It's beautiful. See, now all I can think of is a tropical date night, and I think this fragrance would be wildly sexy over the summer. It's just beautiful. One of those fragrances that I will never get sick of. As a fragrance house, I think Dior is one of the best. They just have incredible fragrances. They have a lot of classic fragrances like the original Miss Dior, which you can get a bottle of the original Miss Dior. And of course, I'm sure they've tweaked it a little bit, but it comes in the old bottle. Their Maison Dior fragrances, they just do such an incredible job. And of their entire selection, and it is huge, Hypnotic Poison is something that just stands out to me every single time. Would you believe that it has been 28 years since Angel was first launched back in 1992? It's next on the list, and unfortunately I don't have it here to show. But Angel is still one of the most popular fragrances, and I think every woman in Miami either wears Angel or Flower Bomb. But I would say a great majority of people wear Angel, and it's one of the reasons why I personally cannot wear it. I'm just so sick of smelling it. But popularity aside, because sometimes, you smell a fragrance so much. If you work in cosmetics, you're constantly making samples. It's all over your clothing, your hands, your hair. But the fragrance itself is truly one of the most beautiful fragrances. I'd be lying if I said I didn't love this fragrance, and when I read that it was launched in 1992, it blew my mind, because you would think that, again, this fragrance was a new launch. It's just so hot, so popular. There just aren't a lot of new fragrance releases that seem to capture people's attention in the same way. We very rarely agree on fragrance. Everybody is so different. We have different tastes. But I feel like Angel is one of those fragrances that everybody likes it. Even if you don't want to wear it, even if it isn't your type of fragrance, you can smell it and you can appreciate what it is. It's so beautiful. Nearly 30 years later, it's still a bestseller. It's a classic. Coming in at number 10, the last fragrance, the oldest fragrance, and definitely the nearest and dearest to my heart, is Gardenia from Chanel. This fragrance was originally launched in 1925 with Ernest Beaux and Coco Chanel. Now, it was changed a little bit in the 80s, but this fragrance is nearly 40 years old, and it is still one of the most beautiful fragrances I've ever smelled. It is my number one favorite fragrance from Chanel, and just one of my favorite fragrances of all time. This was my wedding day fragrance, and I knew the first time I smelled this fragrance that this was going to be the scent I wore on my wedding day. It is just so classic. It's very bridal, but it's just kind of beautiful and floral and feminine, and kind of like the ultimate floral fragrance. It's just a bouquet in a bottle. It's so beautiful, timeless, elegant. I cannot believe that this was relaunched in the 80s, because it smells like something that I would want to wear today. I wish there was a way to smell the original version created in 1925 so I could spot the differences. But this version is very creamy, slightly green. There's a slight crispness to it. It truly smells like fresh gardenias that were cut from the garden. It's one of the exclusives, so it's a bit harder to find. You're not going to find this fragrance at any Chanel counter. Either a Chanel boutique, I believe some Saks carry these fragrances. I also found the Maison Dior fragrances in my local Saks, which really was surprising because I've never seen those outside of a boutique before. It's just so special, and it's one of the few exclusives that I think maintains modern appeal. I would say this is one. Beige. There's just something about Gardenia. This will always be one of the best fragrances in my opinion. And that completes my list. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Leave me your comments, questions down below. Now I want to hear from you guys. What fragrances are your favorite oldie goldies? I love reading your recommendations, so if you have any, drop me a comment. We'll keep the conversation going there. As always, I will be linking everything mentioned, everything on my face, down below in the description box. That's for your convenience. And for more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.